Well, welcome everyone. We'd like to commence our panel on games-based learning. Thank you very much for making your way over to Coronado B here on Wednesday afternoon at GSV. We have a power-packed panel. I'm very excited to be sitting at the side of the stage so we can do this fantastic streak as we go across to my left. I'd like to go ahead and ask each of our panelists, if they will, to first introduce themselves and do that in the lightning round fashion so we can respect Deborah's wishes on this topic. Starting first with Johan.
Yep, I'm Johan Brand. I am originally from Norway, but I have gone to school in the US and the UK and in Norway. And I run a company that does social game-based learning, which is called Kahoot.
That's the critical part, Kahoot. Thank you, Johan. Vu.
That was fast. I don't know how I'll be that fast.
That was pretty fast.
I'm Vu Bui. I'm the COO of Mojang. We make a game called Minecraft. My background is actually in filmmaking and photography, which works well at Mojang because it's all about storytelling, and that's part of what I do there is work in the education space with Minecraft Education Edition.
Terrific. Thank you, Vu.
Whoa, that was fast.
Sure.
Okay. So my name is Norihisa Wada. I'm from Japan, and I've developed many educational games for Nintendo platform, mainly in Nintendo DS and Wii's. And currently, actually, I've conducted 3 years of Ministry of Education Japan-funded research project within Japan using Nintendo DS and Wii, and see how it could be applied into formal learning. And currently, I'm doing a lot of research in using measurable assessments and trying to build a framework so using games in education can be measurable. So that's me.
Outstanding. Thank you, Nori-san. And Lauri.
Yeah, my name is Lauri Jarvilehto. I'm with Lightneer. It's a learning game studio. We started last year with the guys who founded this company called Rovio, who makes the Angry Birds. And well, the task that we've sort of set as our mission is to create learning games that would be as much as fun to play as the best games in the world. So we want to make learning games go mainstream big time. We just announced our first title. It's going to come out later this year. It's a particle physics game called Big Bang. We're developing it with experts from CERN, Harvard, University of Helsinki. And it's pretty cool to see 4-year-olds get really stoked about particle physics. So that's the kind of direction I wish the world can go.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lauri. And I'm Rob Hutter. My fund is called Learn Capital. We do EdTech venture funding, and just a very small amount in games today. But I expect with the leadership of the folks on the stage today, our entire space could change over the next 5 to 10 years. So I want to begin. Mark Prensky wrote a book about 10 years ago called Don't Bother Me, Mom, I'm Learning. And it was sort of trying to herald a new era where games would be part of what kids did on a curricular basis. Halfway through the book, he had a big and very intriguing chapter, and he called it the Fire and Ice chapter. And fundamentally, when he went back to folks in the entertainment space, he said, listen, this is like fire and ice, right? Fire is the entertainment virtues you want. Ice is the fact that you're trying to essentially do programmatic instruction this way. It's not going to work. So I'd like to go ahead and open it up to our team here. Do you guys agree? Is that a false dichotomy? Can you really combine fun and learning in the sense that people mean it institutionally?
Yeah, well, it's interesting with your background, because my background is actually fine art as well. And I chose fine art photography because I went to business school, forced by my parents. I didn't want to go, but I didn't have a better plan, so I kind of, you go. I think it's quite a classic story for a lot of people. While being there, I felt the way the learning happened didn't fit with my world. I started my own business, and I chose fine art to study because I wanted to learn the process of study. And the reason for that was because, to answer your question, before that, I was using the camera to learn. So I was using my video camera to go around the world, and I was creating stories, and I was telling stories, and I was learning through interaction and creation. And really, that process isn't very different to the way games work now, why Minecraft works so well. It is a creation process, storytelling, is connecting with humans, empathy. So I just think we have some idea what games are, and we're not realizing that it's a human condition. It's a language we have, and we use it everywhere.
Very, very intriguing. Other panelists, Lauri.
Yeah, I think, well, your question, whether it's a false dichotomy, I would say emphatically yes, it is a false dichotomy. Namely, when we're doing background research on how to leverage games in learning, the original idea was like, that you have these highly successful games and perhaps they could be used in learning. But what we discovered was, first of all, that actually the sort of process, psychological processes that are relevant for learning are almost exactly the same things that a great game designer needs to tap into. So they're almost overlapping one another. And the other really cool thing that we discovered was that actually every single great game out there needs to be a learning experience. If you don't have this sense of growing, sense of like learning new techniques and new things about the game, you're not going to play that game for very long. So the personal growth, learning, and gaming, they're somehow, I mean, it's still very hard to put your finger exactly on why that overlap is so huge and why we've been like, sort of like misled so far about it. But to make a long story short, I mean, learning and gaming, they're both ways for human beings to grow, to develop new skills, and to become better.
Right, right.
Let's just follow on because that's where we're a research-based platform as well. And what's interesting about it is our insight actually added also in behavioral design. So if you look at all the platforms that work in the world like Facebook, Slack, and so on, actually the behavior design going into those products are exactly the same that goes into a game, so it goes into learning models. So we just looked at all of them and just going, well, there's a clear path here that's the same. And then we call it the Kahoot model, and it's just based on behavior design, game design, and learning design. And it's very, very interesting that that parallel was just so clear throughout our platform. And anywhere you go.
Well, we've in the center of our stage, thank you, Johan. Let's jump on that, if I can. Nintendo, Nori-san, and Minecraft, Vu. So, they bring to mind this idea that kids today have a combinatorial explosion of entertainment options at their fingertips in ways that they didn't have even 5 years ago, right? So against that context, how do you create a sense that you can do learning in games? Are games and learning meant for school time, or are they things that can actually encroach upon leisure? Vu.
Yeah, I mean, we think about that a lot. What we think of Minecraft as is more of a platform, and so it's not. It's definitely not developed as a learning game or a game for learning. It's developed as a game to have fun. And as we just talked about, it's almost impossible to have fun in a game and not learn something as well. Even if you are cheating at the game, you have to go look that stuff up and figure it out just so you can cheat. So you're going to learn even through the process of trying not to learn how to play the game, right? So for us, it really is about focusing, and maybe our example is slightly different, but for us, we want to focus on developing the best game possible. But as that game is a platform. It's an open world game that people can do anything with. And one of those things you can do is build stories within it, and those stories can be used for teaching. And so that's what we want to focus on, is keeping something that is open enough, easy, accessible, and then people can do whatever they want with it. And we don't want to tell them what that should be.
Very interesting. Again, this idea that games and learning just connect in all as a more fundamental level. Nori-san.
So, sure, in Japan, we started developing games for Nintendo, meaning it's an off-the-shelf product. And of course, it was a game focused for education, but the weight was more on the entertainment side. But because the teachers and the bureaucrats at the Ministry of Education thought it might have a potential in a formal classroom settings, that was the reason they set up a 3-year research project. And initially, we started out with a very simple educational games using Nintendo DS with a low metacognition approach. And people would use like 15 minutes within the classroom, and outcome was great. And what we observed was not only the effectiveness, children playing that, they were having fun. You can just see on their smiles. And even the teachers were surprised. So definitely, I am a strong believer that education can be fun. And for a lifelong learning to exist, the fundamental part should be fun.
Well, I remember the Brain Age very well when that came out in the DS, and it was an overnight sensation. And I think both you, Nori-san, in that experience, and certainly Vu with Minecraft, you have the incredible luxury privilege of being involved with entertainment products that did explode in leisure.
I think about this question of what you can actually learn in a game, and I think what people miss as well are all the things that you learn unintentionally when you're playing games. I mean, if you think of any multiplayer game out there, you have to learn social skills in order to succeed. Most multiplayer games, you need the people you're playing with in order to succeed in whatever that game is. And the skills you need to communicate with each other are necessary skills for life. And we can talk about the need for certain measurable skills in math and science, and there's things you want to nail. But you talk about the skills that people need later on in life. I mean, social skill is really high on that list. You can be a genius and still not get a job because you can't get through an interview, right? So I think a lot of the things that people learn in games, completely accidentally, you could call it, are some of the most valuable skills you can get. And those aren't really what people are talking about.
Well, it's interesting, the University of Wisconsin and James G's lab and a lot of the great work done by Claudia and Kurt, I mean, they've studied World of Warcraft, right, as an SEL tutor in this regard, which is fascinating. But let's pull it back to, to Lauri and Johan. Let's ask this other question, which is, clearly, if you're using this game in your leisure time, you're learning all this dimensionality. But what about teaching core curriculum, right? I mean, I think it's a question that's on a lot of people's mind. Johan, your platform is used in school by tens of millions of people every month, right? Millions daily.
Yeah.
Shed some light on this.
I'm going to continue. You're speaking to converted here, but it's kind of the it's the heart of what we're doing, and actually why we are not worried about what you're teaching. We're worried about how you're learning. And the point for that is actually you have Common Core in the US, you have something else somewhere else, and it changes all the time and so on. And there was a pedagogist, I think it's Swiss, and it was about 1700s. He talked about we're not learning for the whole human. We're going for the logic and the kind of the tactical, but we're not going for the emotions. And this is what games have figured out is actually learning with emotions. So what we're focused on, and we are used in classrooms, and they're teaching Common Core. But that's not what Kahoot is doing well for them, is actually the social skills, which is applied on top of the Common Core. How they're learning, whatever you're teaching is through the human interaction. So we have this thing we called hand, mind, and heart. And what we bring to the table is the heart. And I think Common Core is great, it's got all the things in it, but it lacks the human element to it. So for us, is yes, of course you can teach Common Core. It is about getting people engaged in their learning the social skills. I think for us, what we see on a platform, people searching for. They're searching for Common Core and so on, but the most searching for are things which are not in the Common Core, which tend to be life skills, preparing for work, collaboration, all those other things that the games do so well. And what pisses me off is there is no difference between play and learning. Play is our language we got born with to learn. Hence, games is the beginning, is the one we did it way before we had computers. So whenever I hear this talk, it's a bit like saying computers shouldn't be in classrooms. It's reality. If water shouldn't be here, but you're in water, you need to swim. It's kind of, so this thing for me about play and not being separated, I think we need to move on from that discussion. Common Core is there, we need to teach it, we need to use playing as a way of doing it, and games is an awesome structured way of doing it. But actually, I think governments can deal with. And the problem we see as a platform is that people are scared of gaming. They think it's frivolous, and they think that playing is something that you do less and less in life. But at the end of the day, it's why we're so bad at collaborating. It's empathy. So for me, it's like I'm on a mission to just get people to understand and come out of their shells.
So really opening up the third wall, so to speak. I mean, let me jump down to Lauri, because Lauri, in your case, right, you are building a game that is going to deliver, right, through play and osmotically, particle physics, we understand correctly. So a humble start to your gaming empire. Tell us more about what you think. Can we teach curriculum in the context that the administrator at a school or district would want to hear about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a short answer, of course we can. The second follow-up is that we actually also should leverage games. Not just games, but a huge variety of these like next generation learning methods that we've been hearing a lot about like during this summit as well. And the reason is that the education methodologies in use right now are inadequate in the world as it develops. Like Bill Gates pointed out, we're going to need 11 million more people in just US with degrees, more than we can produce with the current system. So the current system can't keep up with the changing world, with the demands that it puts on us. The other thing is there was just recently a very interesting piece of research published by a Finnish professor, which pointed out that 25% of school kids today suffer from a condition known as bore out. So they're so badly bored in school that they can't concentrate. And if they can't concentrate, they don't learn. So actually, the kind of method of setting people in rows, keeping a lecture to them, that's actually not even generating learning, which is a kind of paradox that our educational systems aren't generating learning. And a whopping 50% of these same school kids have absolutely no idea why they need to go to school. Now, Michael Moe had this really amazing thing he pointed out in his talk, that basically school kids spend 10,000 hours, the requisite for expertise in school, and they spend 10,000 hours playing video games. And how come, now let me ask you this, how come we don't have more world-class, Olympic level experts coming out of the schools if they put that amount of work in? The thing that we need to do is restructure education so that it actually delivers learning, so that people actually get engaged enough with what they're learning, that they actually put that 10,000 hours to use, they actually come out of the schools with a skill set that's pretty much amazing.
Right, right.
And games are, like we already brushed these games in pretty much activating the same areas in the brain as learning and stuff like that. So games are one of the best tools we can leverage to make that happen. And we've seen even 4 or 5-year-old kids learning things like algebra and hopefully soon particle physics, just because they love the game. And that love translates to learning because you get attention, you get engagement, you get stickiness and retention, and that's actually what learning is.
So pulling from that, then there seems like there's a question: if you're going to make a game that can drive that engagement, you got to make a good game.
Exactly.
Right? So talk about. I mean, how do you? As far as I understand, Pixar is the only company ever, for every single film that they've released, has reached at least 100 million in the box office and been successful. No other film company in the history of the planet has ever done that. Boo, you're a filmmaker. How do you get to a high engagement game design if you're also trying to accomplish what Lauri's talking about?
I wouldn't say that I know the best about how we can replicate the success of something like Minecraft. If we knew how to do that, right. Minecraft 2 and 3 and 4 would be out there. But when you look at a company like Pixar and what they've done, what they do a lot is, even during the process, they are willing to throw it all away, or they're willing to just iterate on what they've done. And they don't ship something until it's done. And their process is less driven by the end goal, we need to get this movie out, and more driven by, we need this film to be amazing. And so we all have limitations and restrictions. And if you're within a company that is saying that the most important thing is that you hit your deadline, well, you're going to hit your deadline probably, but that doesn't necessarily mean you will ship the most amazing project. And most of us don't have the luxury of spending as much time as we want on something. Right. So having the backing from a company, someone like Pixar, who is actually from the top, their mentality is that doesn't ship until it's great. Right? Or maybe even better than great. Maybe they say it doesn't ship until it's the most amazing thing ever. And if you can have that freedom, then sure, you could deliver amazing things all day. Most people are not going to have that. So I don't know how you can replicate that without just starting to throw money at projects and finding people who really have that passion. Because you do have people who are more results driven, and you do have people who don't care about when and how much it costs or any of that stuff. They have a much more story-driven vision, you could call it. And that's what's delivering these different experiences that we consider to be amazing. But in reality, it's just that that vision was allowed to be played out as opposed to shortchanged through a process.
I have a comment on that one.
Johan.
Yeah, because actually we studied Pixar, at least I studied Pixar quite a lot when I started Kahoot. Because I was fascinated exactly by this. And I think the first thing we found that we wanted to do was create something that connects both with children and parents at the same time. So when they engage in a game of Kahoot, it was very important for us that both the parent, the adult, and the young connected on it, so they had a shared moment, so that actually that in itself became something bigger. And that's something magical about Pixar, is you actually, both you and the parent are connecting over it to have a shared moment, which is, a big part of it. And the second part, I was wondering, okay, how they got to that, and actually I looked at how they structured their office. And actually the way Pixar's office is structured is part of actually why they're so good at what they're doing, because people are interacting. They physically design the office so people that bump into each other. So that accountants and lawyers and motion are all guys that don't really talk to each other, and that creates a better culture which then can actually do these things, and they have an acceptance. So for us it was actually working with the company culture and understanding the connections, and I think we have a lot to learn from Pixar. We don't have the money that Pixar has. How are you doing on a lower scale? You're quicker to market. You're smarter. But I think you have to study the success of others and try and apply it again and again.
Very, 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 very insightful. Yeah, Norihisa.
when you say good game, good educational game, I'd like to kind of categorize whether it's a sandbox type of game or is it more structured, focused. There's a rubric that you're aiming for. And learning doesn't have to end within the game. If there is a good teacher who can apply and good instructional design how to best use these games, then that total environment itself is a content. So my experience is more on the rubric side, but I am now very interested in the sandbox types of games because the 21st century skills and affinity space is more driven there. So I think to define, not one game fits all. Yeah. So when you say define a good game, you have to know what is the strong point of the particular game that you're trying to use in your classroom, and what is your goals, and what was the design and the intention of the developer of the game. So it's more of a cross-professional people that comes out with a good outcome.
That's a very, very simple point. I'll just jump on one other thing for Norihisa in your experience. So I thought that was a very, very helpful way to think about contextualizing game experiences that happen in classroom, right? Connecting them with lesson plans,
yes,
having instructors elaborate beyond the time you're on the screen. You did this project, or you just kicked it off with the ministry. 3-year project, longitudinal. Do they or do they not work? So give us some insight.
Sure.
Okay. What's the headline or the sneak preview?
The project started in 2010 and ended in 2012. It was a 3-year project. And okay, this is a funny story. I'll try to make it short, okay? So there's a famous publishing company in Japan called NHK Publishing. It's like NHK is like the BBC.
Right.
And in 2002, they released a book saying, be careful of the game brains. Games destroy brains. And the same publisher in year 2012 published a book saying, games solve everything. It's a great change, right?
Both sides
so
of that.
Anyhow, in 2010, Ministry of Education said, hey, is the off-the-shelf product damages the brain of children? That was the first year. We devoted whole first year in that research. No. The answer was no. And second year was, it's the off-the-shelf product. It wasn't designed to be used in the classroom. So how could this be applied in the classroom? So 50 minutes, personal time using that, as well as after playing, let's do a kind of remedial discussion. What was your tactics? What was your strategy? It was facilitated by the teachers. So the second year was finding best practices. And the third year was, how do we expand this practice throughout Japan? So it was carefully laid out.
So, and it's still moving because the efficacy questions are still under your careful scrutiny.
Hopefully.
Yes. Yes. Well, let's talk about this other question, which I think ties to everything on stage and different products that are represented here. Should we be concerned or not about access to basic infrastructure to actually bring games, particularly to classroom settings, and perhaps speak about what the wider ecosystem? Maybe Lauri, a lot of experience with Rovio, which is one of the DNA strands in your company. Maybe discuss your point of view on this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the way things are setting out right now is that there is this, I think, a huge threat of this widening sort of gap in access to digital devices, which is leading to actually a kind of a how would you say, kind of an intellectual inequality between people. So this was also brushed in several talks today and yesterday, this idea that basically talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. Now, I believe that digital devices can actually be a way to remedy this situation. So they can offer, like Bill Gates pointed out, they can offer a more personalized, tailor-made learning experience for people. They can also introduce like a gamut of different kinds of like methods that you can use to tap into this, like what we now know actually generates learning. And at the end of the day, I think two things matter. One is that we should really hurry to put that infrastructure down so that every single kid has access to this, because that's gonna look really bad in 10 years. If we're gonna have a bunch of kids who got to play with these things and a bunch of kids who didn't, and these bunch come out of the school with the 10,000 hours of this, like, wow, I'm really great at this, and these other guys don't, and that's not the society I want to be, like, looking at that point. And the second thing, I've had the pleasure of working with our policymakers, with our ministers, with our parliament on like figuring these things out. And the second thing is that we're actually, having said that, we're too focused on hardware, because the hardware alone doesn't solve anything. It only like creates sort of a fertile ground for the solution.
Right.
The software, the applications, the methods are what is key in this next generation learning. So we need to, we just need to like do everything in our power to put the infrastructure together, but not leave it at that. We have to follow up immediately with the best apps out there, the best software.
Yes.
Put Kahoot on every single tablet out there, and like you're already well set for the future.
Right. Thank you, Larry.
I was just going to say, I think you should flip the question. Because when you only had a little ugly prototype of Kahoot that was in House of Lords in the UK, and they were launching a program called Tablet for Schools. So, walking in, of course, I was in full fury, because this is the wrong question you're asking. It's not tablet for schools. We already know that teachers had this tablet anxiety, that they had the tablets lying in their desk, not knowing what to do about it, so they were very scared. And as you're saying, it was about getting the right content. But actually, I believe we can design for the infrastructure which is there at the moment. That's a lot actually our research was about as well. But the second part is, if we create best examples, then schools and districts, and they will want to invest in this, right? Because they're already spending the money elsewhere, so I don't think they're going to get bigger budgets. But if we do good practice, we show this works, I think we'll change their motivation to go and buy this as well. I think it's a hard sell to go out and finance every school with Wi-Fi and everything you're needing, but I think it'd be easier to change the kind of acceptance for this to happen.
Right.
I think at least as a startup, that has to be my attitude, because I can only do as best I can with my tool and inspire others.
Okay. So design for what exists infrastructurally already.
Yeah, and then inspire others to then actually shift their budget towards it.
Interesting enough. So Minecraft is now owned by Microsoft, right? So a company that has something to say about sort of infrastructure. What do you think about this issue, Vu?
I mean, I don't know what that big noise is, but I basically agree with these guys. They seem to have thought about it a lot more than me. I think that for us, and it's taken us a long time to get on all the platforms we're on, right? Like you want to be everywhere, and so we were designing for what's out there and putting it out there, and you want to be on everything. You want to be available to everyone. If you think about books and libraries, the whole point was to make information accessible to everyone. And now information is not really only in these books. In fact, they contain such a small portion of our information, but there's still libraries everywhere. And what we need to do is get to the place where the technology, which is modern to how we learn and how we interact with information and interact with each other around the globe, is there for everyone. And I think that the approach of inspiring, like if you can make it seem like, oh, it is necessary to have in order to even learn. Like you need this minimum amount of technology in order to even be considered that you are learning in a school or whatever the setting is, then it will follow, because people will push for it. When they don't feel that there's a need for it, they're not going to. So we have to create that inspiration so they do.
You can bring the old computer labs back to life by actually, this cool thing with games, they work on absolutely the most basic code. So the old, we've been having fun every time we see an old computer lab being brought back to life, because they can run the game on the most basic computers. It changes attitudes, and that's so important for us, because we tend to say we always have to have the top end VR, whatever it is, but actually the old computer lab can run the coolest games if they're the right games.
Very good point. And in fact, actually, so you gave me another rabbit hole to jump down in that last part of your comment, Johan. So I think we general agreement that there's infrastructure out there, could be improved, but you can design to it, and even design to aging machines if you were thoughtful about it. But the big question potentially in any gaming conversation, right? I think GDC is now called the GDC and VR Developers Conference, right, if I'm not mistaken. So what about VR AR? We could spend a little bit of time, but we're just barely getting the beginning of mobile games. What about this next platform evolution? Nori-san, what do you think?
I think it has a good potential to be adapted into an education environment. For example, if you were to go out in the field and study, and if you look at the tree and through VR, if you have a metadata that shows it, then it's the learning happens outside the classroom then. So I think such technology has a very big potential. And I'm very sorry that I cannot say much about this area. But that should explain, that has a potential. Yes, definitely, yes.
Big thumbs up. Anyone else want to touch the big VR topic?
The thing is, it's another piece of technology that we can use to do cool things, right? And it's more immersive. And if you look at the history of technology, how we got to where we are now, and everyone using tablets and cell phones, and what you can do on those, it's another way to interact with whatever it is that we're building. People said that cinemas would die out because people wouldn't want to go watch movies anymore.
Right.
But here we are, and we still do it, right? And 3D happened back in the 60s, and then came back, and it's probably going to go away again, right? Like, all of these technologies are just different ways of experiencing whatever a storyteller is really creating. And I think that AR, movies have been predicting the future of AR for a very long time. Terminator, you had the AR and identifying what is dangerous and what isn't. And if you think about just having that access to information that goes beyond what your brain can process and just pulling information for you, it's just another shortcut, like using a calculator instead of writing down on paper, right? It's a shortcut. And with those shortcuts, that means that we can process more information overall. Maybe we will reach some weird limits somehow, but we're not there yet.
Fascinating.
AR will be a big part of that.
So a direct write to the neural tissue, as it were, getting closer to that asymptote. Interestingly enough, on this topic, if you were to think about making this neural write process as efficiently as possible, we talked earlier about the group dynamics that certainly exist inside Minecraft. I mean, can we think of games perhaps coming at it from a different slant as the ultimate form of personalization? Who wants to take that one? Lauri?
Can you come again, the question?
Are games the ultimate form of personalization? If we drink back to what they can do for learners to make more efficient their journeys.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'm going to need to sort of copy what Nori-san said earlier on, that kind of depends on the game design. So, I mean, I guess, like, in a sandbox style game, you have lots of opportunities for personalization. For the style game that I believe is the majority of the great performers in mobile, these kind of strong core game, metagame combination type games, like Supercell's games, like some Rovio games, that doesn't have that much room for personalization because we need to control the kind of the growth process there. But on the other hand, what does give a lot of room is the actual gameplay, the pacing of the gameplay. So actually, when you have a well-balanced game, it offers a huge variety of different kinds of gamers. Supercell games are a great example of that. You can play them completely casually, just a couple of minutes there, a couple of minutes here. And then you can also go almost mid-core, hardcore. You can go all in, really develop this understanding of how the different troops in Clash of Clans work, or how the different cards balance one another in Clash Royale. And that, I believe, is actually more crucial, that balancing of what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls his flow channel, balancing of skills and challenges. And that's where actually games do offer a great degree of personalization, in that a well-designed game needs to offer you that sensation of flow and balance.
Right.
Can I challenge that as well? I think game mechanics and game approach has a good chance in personalization. Let's say if you are developing a game that has a very well outlined rubrics, then contents could be adaptive depending on your skills. As well as, for example, if you look at Mario Kart, it's very entertaining because you get to compete with your best lap. If any of you have played, there's a ghost there. Yeah. It's your best lap ghost. You're competing with yourself.
Yes.
It's a personal kind of experience.
Yeah, and we copied that.
Yeah. So these elements can, if designed carefully and right, help self-regulated learning process, which is necessary for 21st century skills.
Very well articulated.
Can I add one thing?
Please.
Yeah. I actually think that every game, no matter what, is going to give a more personalized experience. If you think of reading a book is a very passive activity. Now, you take what you know, it's still a personal experience because you're taking out of that book through your own filters. Right? Watching a movie is also a very passive experience. But that same exact story in a game, even if the only difference is where you're turning your head, you have personalized it. And there's a sense of id and a sense of like, I am in this or I am experiencing this as opposed to I am watching this. And that is a big difference. And that does make it more personal, even if the game is not designed to be personally identified with that player.
Do you remember Choose Your Own documentary? Choose Your Own adventure books? Yeah. So you were flipping around the books and you were making your own story as you were going through it. I was lucky to live with a guy that when we were going to school, and he created a documentary about this and actually made a live show. This is now going to be a film, which is going to be interactive. So the storyline is going to be broken up, and it's always different. There's 1,000 different ways of the story, but every audience has a unique story moment together, and the same in the book. It's a unique journey through the book. So I think actually we have had a lot of personal stuff. It's just that it's when we allow people to choose to be part of it. And actually I think the one that's exciting about when technology gets there is when you can actually read human emotions and understand it. So what we're doing with Kahoot is we're letting the teacher and the other players at the moment be the human kind of supercomputer in that sense, doing the job for us until we think technology can do it and be part of it. So we actually nicked the ghost mode, we call it in our platform, where you are reviewing against your previous results, or you can challenge someone else on their ghosts. And for us was using, and this was the thing about from going back to Pixar, what are the things that people remember? They remember from the games, the teachers remember, the kids learn it, they get to share language, and all of these emotional things attached to these things was super interesting. So for me, personalization is about understanding the emotions that unfold while the game is going, and I think it's both human and computer facilitated, right?
Well, so picking up what you're saying, Johan, you also spoke about emotion earlier in this panel, and Vu, picking up the discussion about different media, film, books, for example. I mean, it sounds like if there's a common denominator in games, right, it is to some degree this emotional vector. It could be motivational, perhaps in a puzzle game. It could certainly be emotional in a deeper game where you're putting yourself inside a story. But is that in many ways the key common denominator behind what makes something a gaming experience or some other form of media consumption?
Interesting question.
You have to have emotions to make you succeed. I mean, that's the human condition. That's why I'm so constantly focused on it, because you're saying a platform, we're saying a platform, and I think everything that, to put it this way, your exam can also be a very emotional moment, and I think it's good for stress. I think I said it to, I say it all the time, but I say it's funny that we think the stress before exam is good for you, but the stress you have during a game is bad for you. Stress is very emotional, right? And it creates all stuff with you. So I think you have to have emotions and things if people interact with it. You're either going to hate it, love it, whatever it is. If it doesn't have an emotion with you, you're not going to register with it, and it's going to be gone.
And then that's just boredom, right? Manifesting itself.
And also, I think the power of games is the interaction, right? Whatever you do, there's a feedback. And on the book, of course, you get immersive, you get into it. But sometimes, when I was small, after reading a book, I want to try that. But I can't try it on a book, right? But in a game experience, you can try it, and you can have an instant feedback. Then you get to learn. It's more deepened learning, I think.
Can I follow on that?
Core on interactivity.
Yeah, because so the next step for us, which has kind of been our plan all the time, is we want to turn every user into a game designer. Because the same way you need to learn how to write, take photos, so on, it's about human interaction, understanding, and making them kind of be challenged by what you're doing. So designing a game yourself as a student, you're not only just designing a challenge, but you also have to understand how do I emotionally engage them so that, right and wrong answers, questions, supporting imageries, you're actually designing an emotional experience for someone. And through that journey, the teacher can assess, of course, all what's going on, and they can assess you much more wholly than the facts. Knowing the wrong answer is a very powerful thing for a teacher, because then they can take away all these things, and as a student even more, because you're reflecting over things and how is he going to receive it, and their situation. So I think game design is probably, that's why I love Minecraft, because what they're doing, they're designing challenges for others, they're designing stories. So I think we learn a lot from what you guys are doing and the behaviors we see there, and I think there's so much more to be learned. But we need to understand that actually the best game is going to come from the learners themselves. They're going to make the best games for other learners.
Yeah.
Lauri.
Yeah, we're actually earlier discussing with Johan about that we need to disagree on some things. I can maybe disagree.
It's your time.
Yeah. No, I mean, about what you said about emotions, that it doesn't really matter what kind of emotions. I think it actually matters a lot in terms of like, if you have like a sense of fear or stress or anxiety or something like that, that actually like, it leads to aversion behavior, which is really bad for attention. So if you're trying to avert the source of the fear, you're not paying attention to that, or your attention is moving elsewhere, like seeking a way out from that. And I think one of the biggest pressing challenges that like we brushed already, like in what Gates talked about, and these like 25, 50% numbers. One of the most pressing challenges for schools is that there's this widening attention gap growing. What I mean by that is that basically when kids go to school, their minds wander. They're either bored or stressed. They're not like focused on what's being taught, and if they're not focused, they're not learning. And then they come out of the school, and I think this is the reason why these numbers are skyrocketing right now. When they go to recess or go to home, they got all this like gamut of digital, like super engaging entertainment that you gravitate towards. And that, that sense of gravitation, that sense of these emotions, this like, sense of challenge, sense of, and I have to look back, I do agree with the fact that like, stress when properly proportioned is actually a very good thing. Flow, like, which is one of the key things.
So we agree that we don't disagree, we agree.
Yeah, I'm really like doing my best here.
Trying to disagree.
So anyway, but yeah, to make a long story short, so it's basically like, we in order to cross the attention gap, what we need to learn is to make schooling and education competitive with these other sources of engagement that we have.
Right.
And once we crack that, and we already have all the tools that we need to do that. And once we just implement those tools, bring them to schools, we're all set. We're going to have an amazing educational systems.
It's just fascinating. Learning is awesome, and we make it boring. And even by talking about being boring, people think it's boring. And they hear what you're saying as a parent, right? And it's so funny. Learning is awesome, and it's our job to keep it awesome and not make it boring. I mean, that's
Very
kind of why I'm in the industry for this.
No, learning's fun until you go to school, right?
Yeah, and institutionalized.
Like, kids are learning from the point when you can communicate at all.
We'll speak about this movement of venues. Let's talk about Minecraft. Is it true that people are conducting entire school experiences in Minecraft? I mean, I've heard of virtual schools that are run entirely in Minecraft. What kind of texture could you share with us about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't know too much about that, actually. Yeah, I've heard of it as well, but I've never visited or spoken to the people who are actually doing this. So I've read a couple articles where there are these virtual schools, and they are held in Minecraft. There's a lot of things that are being done in Minecraft. Right. Virtual game shows and all of these things where people attend as their avatar in Minecraft, and they experience it through their screen and from that perspective. So each person who's there is having their own perspective. I've never watched it or joined in though, so I don't have too much to say. Yeah, it is a little bit.
Because I design learning games in Second Life.
Right, Second Life.
That was a
great
disaster.
precursor in this, right? So what's great about GSV Conference is that it allies a lot of different threads. It allies K-12 as well as higher education and corporate. Let's talk for just 2 seconds as we come around the last furlong of our session. What about beyond K-12? Games and corporate games that meet learning goals in just a more general mass consumer sense. Anyone want to take that up? What do you think the relevance and the importance of games are going to be?
We are growing massively in corporate gaming. And that's our business strategy. It's actually, we call it from classroom to boardroom. And there's no difference between the learning happening when you're a kid and when you're in the boardroom. It's a social, it's the same human interactions, the same things. We don't change. We don't become a new being when we leave school. So at the moment, I think we're growing faster in corporate than we're doing in schools in terms of percentage. And that's because, and they're adopting our K-12 optimized product.
Yes, fascinating.
We kept on saying we need to make sure we do this thing so that it's easier for corporates, but then we realized actually they are using even the kind of this fun, crazy one we're doing in school. So corporate learning is, our companies are going to get much more collaborative and more empathetic because they're going to do gaming. That's our hope.
That sounds awesome.
Can I? Oh,
Nori-san.
No, go.
All right.
It's you.
I agree. Corporate place is one domain, but I would like to address another aspect there could be a potential. I think games being used to acquire knowledge in cognitive skills and stuff, but I think it has a great fit with non-cognitive skills. Because if you want to assess non-cognitive skills, not only the, you have to read the test items, but there's a scene there, and you have to engage to. Maybe it's a better measurement tool than the paper-based forced choice or open-ended questions.
Games as assessing or teasing out
because
non-cognitive
let's say you're in a forest, then what Busan thinks of a forest and what I think of a forest is different, right?
Right.
But if there's a scene, then it's more controlled.
Fascinating. Well, we're almost towards the end of our session. I want to ask a very important question. Let's take like our time capsule and let's roll forward in time, 10 years if we can. What did games and learning look like in 10 years? How would we be addressing this panel? Like, I guess we would be doing it through some sort of VR avatar. We wouldn't actually be sitting here. Besides that aspect, solar power plants notwithstanding. What's your predictions? Who wants to start?
I can start since I'm sitting
Please.
here and I like to speak. No,
You do?
I have a lot I want to get said.
So much to say.
When I started out kind of in my professional life, which was doing business after I was done with school, I started working with social media. Before 2006, social media, people were, I couldn't explain to companies why it was important with social media, but I just knew it was. And I tried to say it's people interacting with each other and having stories. And that's what's going to be important. And being on that journey of the last 10 years of social media, I think games and playing is a little bit on the same journey. So in the same, if you're thinking about when Facebook came out in 2004, 6, whatever it is, and what it is now, I think I predict games are going to have the same impact as you see with social media. And I think social media runs our world in many aspects where we are. So that's my prediction. And I think that happens in social media because it's a human thing. And it's about interactions and so on. And I think when games are doing the same, and those games are going to, and I think Minecraft are one of those that are showing that, because that's what was lacking in Second Life when I was doing learning games there. So it'll be interesting to see.
So games are as big as social media is today, 10 years
Games
ago.
is playing, so it's a human condition.
Fabulous. Boo.
Yeah, like right now when you look at what's going on with games out there and what people say against games, it's quite similar to when the internet was taking off and people are against that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that people were against books at some point. Like, no one's going to read these pieces of paper when we can talk to each other. So when you think about that, it's just part of the progression. I don't think there will be this resistance to games. There's a bad connotation when you say the word games with some people. Right. And they say, well, I don't want my kid to play games. I want them to read books. There's some bad stuff in books. Like, there's some bad books out there, right? There's amazing stuff. There's horrible things. There's all kinds of stuff. And you can have good or bad content, which is very individual, right? In any medium. It doesn't matter what it is. Games is just another way for people to experience things. And so once that becomes accepted, that it is just yet another channel, then yeah, I think 10 years from now we will be there. It will be like that.
Very insightful.
So
we're taking up all the
Nori-san.
good stuff, so
Yeah,
there's
you're
not much
right.
left for you guys.
right.
Clear this next level.
Okay, first of all, that's quite difficult.
Well done.
Okay, first of all, I hope the issues around education is like, we need infrastructure, we need tablets, devices, stuff like that. But I think there is a bigger future gap if the learner does not learn self-regulated learning. And I think it's a question whether game competing with other media, can games, is there any aspects of the future skills that game can better provide than other medias? That's where we have to look into. And also that's where we need educators and pedagogists and data science to help work with us. And we need to do a lot of good practices to keep these good movements going on in the future. So that's
Very trenchant. That you get the bonus star and unlock Lauri on that.
Well, first of all, I mean, like Niels Bohr once said, prediction is really difficult, especially predicting the future. But this one I think is a no-brainer. 10 years from now, learning games are going to be everywhere. The reason why I'm so confident about this is if you think there's a perfect analogy in how mobile games exploded. In 2007, gaming was something that people thought that like geeky 15-year-old guys do. Now everybody plays games. Practically, there's like billions of, like Angry Birds alone has been downloaded more than 3 billion times. So there's like, everybody who has a mobile device has some game on that, almost without exception. So now, if you think about the scenario, once we crack this, once we crack how to make learning games as much fun as any other game, would you rather spend those 2 minutes waiting for the taxi or the bus, playing something that's just kind of like, that you get this like slight headache afterwards, or something that actually like, keeps generating more like insights about a new language or particle physics or biology or whatnot? And I think the answer is no-brainer. So we just need to crack this balancing act of learning and gaming, and in 10 years, they're going to be everywhere.
Learning games will be everywhere. What a great way to end the panel. Big hand for our very august guest here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.